right, well, we should definitely kick off. Thank you so much that we acknowledge this is the last session of MCN 2014. We are so pleased to have you all here. Today's topic is Centralized, Decentralized, Distributed, Emerging Models for Online Learning in Museums. And in full disclosure, I have fully pulled these guys into the depths of research that I'm doing right now, but which is why I've been so also pleased to have this panel join us in the room. And then we have Rolin, who has just finished his PhD at Pepperdine, who has been looking very closely at MOOC models. So what I'd like to do, before we get here, is first introduce the panel, and then I'm going to actually introduce the topic by the ways that I've been thinking about it for my particular research, because these guys have been so gracious to come along with this for this ride. So first we have at the end Emily Lytle-Painter, who has just begun as senior content manager over at the Getty Museum. Ed Blackma, who has just left her position at the Getty. Next we have Dan Wolff, and he is the manager of educational technology at the American Museum of Natural History, and who's also doing his PhD in science education at Teachers College at Columbia. And then we have Allegra Smith, who's the assistant educator at MoMA, and is also overseeing the MoMA online learning initiatives, also is in charge of their Twitter feed. So. And then myself, I'm Rosanna Flouty. And then behind me, we have Rolin via Skype. And yeah, let's kick this off. So I'd like to begin with this word disruption, because I really want to seize this opportunity to think more critically about this word that I see getting used quite lazily to refer to a new way of fulfilling a need, or worse, a new solution. And that I wanted to look at it in the context of what this word means for museums and for online learning. But I've come to it by this image. And has anyone seen this image before? Okay. Dan Pfeiffer, actually, at MoMA, was the one who first showed me this. How have you seen this image? I'm sorry, can I ask you how you have? You've just seen it. Good. Excellent. Well, this is an image that I found from a research paper from 1964 by someone named Paul Barron. The paper was called On Distributed Communications. This is an image that has haunted me for 3 years now, but has set up 3 different ways of distributing information in the background of nuclear crisis. So this was a very early prototype for ARPANET that became the internet. On the left we have, right, centralized, so all the nodal points information goes through one center and then is going outward. In a decentralized model, you have multiple nodes, and then the information is still slightly more robust, but in a distributed model, you have multiple nodes. Different parts of the network can come down, and the information can still move through. This is like a 12-volume research paper. I'm not giving it any justice, except that when I've come across this image in this context and thinking about nuclear crisis and thinking about what ways information or the urgency to pass information was set against the backdrop of something quite devastating. My field is in urban education, and I keep setting this against the crisis in education, along with fiscal crisis, and this sort of pendulum that keeps swinging between centralized control, decentralized control, and then power and bureaucracy. So I'd like to introduce the topic. This has been my passion topic for the last 3 years, of a radical experiment of informal online television that was in partnership with CBS and with NYU. And it ran for 25 years. In its first semester, the show attracted 44,000 viewers, and its peak had about 2 million daily viewers simultaneously in broadcast. This experiment was really thought of as a way to reach wider audiences. It was offering college credit. There was a place where people could come and call a professor on the phone if they wanted more help. And the semester would culminate in a written exam that people would physically come to NYU and sit for. unusual. And in fact, I've been now looking at this international correspondence school. It had its seat in Scranton, Pennsylvania. By 1890s, there were like 6,000 to 7,000 people enrolled. By 1906, there was 900,000 people enrolled in these courses. These were directed predominantly at draftsmen and coal miners. These were really people who were looking to identify some of the bureaucracies that they could become part of, but they knew they needed to have specialized skill. A lot of the ephemera and the books that I'm finding, the course materials, some of them are like 3 inches tall, and they were designed to like slip in someone's back pocket so that while they were on their work shift, they could be studying in real time. And the previous panel in this room was also looking at the power of radio. I've now found that I think is the earliest instance of teaching on shortwave radio in 1930s. There was a professor at NYU named Professor Clark. This guy was teaching from his home, from his armchair, but he was also in the classroom. And in fact, by 1938, I have found an instance where he did a television broadcast. This is barely 6 or 7 years after the debut of television, to 200 NYU students from the Empire State Building. So I know that there is a much longer history that I think predates the media, but this desire to reach a much bigger audience is not something new. As far as for computer-based learning, the Open University, which I think from the American standpoint, this is a sort of narrative that has been largely not followed, but there's, from 1970 onwards, they were using computer-based learning to reach a wide audience. So this show was called Sunrise Semester. It aired, like I said, at 6:30 in the morning, and was so ridiculed in the press. This guy, Dr. Floyd Zuley, he was tapped as a young professor to be the show's very first host. That same year, because of the show, went on to win every Emmy he was eligible for in 4 categories. I think he didn't win like Best Female Presenter and Best Children's Host, but he won every other category. And that people were riveted that the first book that they ever put on the show, and I want to talk about the fact that these were books, was Stendhal's The Red and the Black. This book sold out in a 30-mile radius when the course book list was announced. And the fact that other bookstores had to try and get the reading list ahead of time so they just could actually stock the books that many people had never even read. And in fact, this book sold more copies in that 1 month in September 1957 than it had in Stendhal's entire lifetime. But then thinking back what NYU must have been like in 1957, and I've been spending a huge amount of time in the archives looking at how did they get the word out in those days and what kind of people signed up for this type of course. And of course, what are they teaching at 6:30 in the morning? So I actually found, because nothing of the show exists, unfortunately, but I'm starting to find a couple of episodes that were not digitized, but I'm getting some of them digitized. But the one that I've been able to find was a comp lit class. I found an episode that essentially is Floyd Zuley, this professor, talking through Marcel Proust for a full hour from a lecture. And I'm going to resist playing the clip because I want to make sure that I'm contextualizing this in a different way. But what I thought was so, I think, telling was that despite these numbers, despite that they had 144,000 people in the very first semester, despite all the that's ridiculous, how could you sell a college degree on television? There was a real struggle in language of identifying who the audience actually was. They knew that because of various mechanics that they had estimated around 2 million people. They were calling it, this is NYU's language, and actually this is grant proposal material that I'm finding in the archives, the most diverse class in the nation, and that they were trying to really struggle to describe who their audience was. They had countless people in all walks of life, businessmen who want intellectual stimulation, school teachers who regard Sunrise Semester as providing refresher courses and refreshment of the intellect, housewives that wanted, sometimes organized groups to discuss the morning's lecture, people in isolated areas, men shaving, women preparing breakfast, people drinking coffee, farmers milking cows, redacted, right? I mean, it's like there's a real struggle, I think, to try and identify who the audience is. And I know as an educator who is passionate about museum programming, this is very familiar territory. So I'll just add this other part. That this is later on in the same grant proposal. The senior citizen, the shut-in, the institutionalized from our correspondence, a large percent of our bathrobe student body well may be between the age of 60 and 94. But by that calculation, what I've really come to realize is, like, if there was a 94-year-old person watching this on television in 1957, they would have been born, like, in the Civil War. And the fact that sort of wide reach and that potential, I think, makes it so incredibly exciting. So I won't go too far into the actual research. Maybe when the degree is done, I will. But what's been so fun is that despite that the Sunrise Semester story has never been told, I'm finding all this cultural ephemera that relates to its impact of the day. So this is just a New Yorker cartoon where a woman is slapping her presumably inebriated husband on the bar floor saying, Ken, oh Ken, sunrise semester tomorrow, like, get up because it'll be 6:30 in the morning. But what I'm finding is that there's actually a very interesting sub-story here of women and domestic interplay of women who had given up their educational aspirations because of the Great Depression. And I think that there's something there around sort of what, in the way that the International Correspondence School in the 1890s offered for people who wanted to have upward mobility, Sunrise Semester seemed to be another avenue to get this type of education, which I think the desire and the motivation and where that comes from is something we'll pick up. So this is just one question for discussion that I've just sort of been thinking about, is to considering our understandings of early distance education and MOOCs, what are the implications of these findings for projecting the future of learning in museums? So that is sort of the overarching question for our panel, but then I'd love to turn it over to Allegra. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Hi. My name is Allegra Smith. I am an assistant educator in the Digital Learning Department of Education at MoMA. So you can see this lovely image through our sculpture garden of the museum. And just to give some background, so we've been doing online courses at MoMA for about 4 years now. We started back in 2010, and when we were piloting this program, the idea was to turn on-site courses into online learning courses and seeing, if the interest was there and how could we translate this information to access for more people internationally and nationally to access our content. So we started with a studio course, which was materials and techniques of post-war abstract painting, and then also a traditional modern art course, both of which had been very successfully taught on site. So you can see since then we've really grown exponentially, and we started offering different types of courses. So about a year and a half ago, we signed a partnership with Coursera, and that type of content shifted from offering continuing education courses for people that wanted to learn these new skills later on in life, to offering courses mostly geared through K through 12 professional development types of courses for teachers. And then most recently, we started offering online courses for teens as well. So there's been this big shift in content, but we've realized how important online and distance learning is to the mission of MoMA and education. So, what happens when you take this idea of distance out of learning is you have this idea that you don't need to be near MoMA any longer in order to kind of have this connection to the museum and be able to really take advantage of these courses. So, it's like the idea of MoMA on the go. We film everything in the galleries, or we follow students through the galleries and the classrooms and things of that nature to really give some more behind the scenes access to people, as well as interviewing curators and conservators and what have you. So, if we think about online courses and online learning, if we think about it as a spectrum from asynchronous to synchronous learning, right? So synchronous learning is kind of this idea of having to be there now. So an example of that would be a Google Hangout, where you have to log in at the same time in order to watch what's happening live. And, you would still have the ability to tweet or comment, but it's that idea that you have to be there now. And then we look on the other end of this spectrum to asynchronous learning, and that's the idea that that content is already there. It already exists. So you can log in at any point in time and be able to access the videos or read the different lectures or whatever types of resources we have there. So, we kind of fall in the middle here where we do some Google Hangouts and then record them and re-embed them later into our courses, or we offer self-guided courses, which, all the content's the same, you just have to log in at any point in time to access it. But then what's really great is with our instructor-led courses, we have this idea of student-led engagement. And these students are the ones that are going through, starting discussions with one another or communicating with other instructors in the course, but they're really forming these communities within the course itself. So when we shifted to Coursera, the first course we did was Art and Inquiry, which was launched with Lisa Manzola as our lead instructor. And again, it was this idea of how do we bring more access to people here? And the thought was that we could start showing people how we teach on-site at the museum in hopes to, give other people inspiration for how they could teach with art in a different manner. And then the same thing, most recently we launched Art and Activity, which featured Jessica Baldenhofer, Stephanie Powell, who's up here, and Lisa Mazzola. And this was kind of another course to slow down the learning process and think about different ways to teach with art. In the past, it might have been someone standing at the front of the room lecturing about a work, but how can we slow down the learning process with activities like close looking or drawing what you're seeing to really try to engage a different audience? Again, this is geared for K-12 teachers, but what we saw is that we had a huge international reach. So if we look on the left here, here's just a quick figure to see that, we've been offering these premium, if you will, for-profit courses since 2010. And we have about 5,000 total alumni since then, but we're represented in, about 150 countries. Whereas as soon as we started offering MOOCs on Coursera, our last class, we had 26,000 people enrolling from 161 different countries internationally. So, people are really taking advantage of this idea of free learning and able to kind of really take advantage of the fact that it's MoMA, but also that it's Coursera. So both of these brands kind of come with a strong following. That's helped us a lot as we've moved forward. So the most recent course we did was Art and Activity, and I'll just give you a quick peek into it here. No? Something. Shoot.
At MoMA, we always teach thematically, meaning all of our lessons connect 4 to 5 works of art around a universal theme, such as characters, spaces and places, or society and politics. Themes provide a unifying framework for connecting artworks across time, space, and mediums. And because the relationship between a theme and an artwork isn't always readily apparent, themes have the power to get your students looking deep below the surface. In our teaching at MoMA, we stress that activities, themes, discussion all support each other within a lesson.
So that's just a short clip there to kind of get a better sense of how we film. So we follow students through the galleries, we film actual engagement in the classrooms, we work with our instructors to kind of visualize the content, and then this was the first time where we toyed with this idea of creating graphics and animations and adding them to our videos, and being very aware of the fact that we were adding these graphics to help people understand the concepts more, but also making sure that it was consistent throughout and we weren't just adding graphics to add graphics. But it proved to be very successful, especially for those students that were doing English as a second language, to see more of the text on screen or the icons representing different types of learning styles or artworks, what have you. I should mention as well, we are very aware of the fact that we have such a broad international audience, and we caption all of our videos and have our transcripts available as well so that people can really take time to understand the information. So then, we have this idea of, well, what happens after these courses end? We started to notice a really incredible community building that's happened through these courses, both during the course, but also after it ends. People are connecting with each other on Facebook, for example. This was a course, our group that started with our first course in 2010. They're still actively posting what they're doing, connecting with each other in person, coming to the museum to meet up with each other, or meet up with our staff. This student here is from Brazil, and she just had a work of art that she did acquired into the Museum of Modern Art there in Rio de Janeiro. And they're really posting, they're actively showing each other what they're doing and doing self-promotion, but we've also noticed that people are building WordPress sites. So this is actually taken from one of our courses where part of the hands-on activity with the course is to make a site that relates to the content this was all about multimedia and art and MoMA acting as a catalyst for it, so naturally it made sense to have this type of activity. But what we've also noticed is we had one student actually make a Second Life gallery, and it was pretty incredible because she was confined to a wheelchair, and what she did is she took all of the images from people in her course that had created these works of art inspired by abstract expressionist painters, and she built this whole gallery to showcase their work. And then finally, we have this idea of, okay, well, this is everything that's great, but how do online courses fit in to, MoMA moving towards a digital museum? So, we're really aware of how great technology and art can be when the two of them are mixed together, and we really strive to faithfully meld the two. So, we're putting a lot of work on exhibitions and sites, web resources like MoMA Learning or MoMA.org, social media, marketing, apps like MoMA Plus, MoMA Audio Plus, and then, live streaming, ebooks, all this stuff really just helps to give more access to people. We realize we have 3 million people visit our museum every year, but we have 20 million people visit MoMA.org each year. So those are huge numbers, and if we can kind of compile all these resources together and continue to give people access, it really improves their visit before they get to the museum, while they're at the museum, but what else can we do to give them more information after they leave? So that's that. Questions before we move on?
The Second Life and the hosting, were those assignments that were part of? So they just went off and somehow MoMA still was able to track them down, or did they brag about them to MoMA? How do you keep the trail of, to kind of keep up that relationship?
Sure, absolutely. The WordPress site, that specific instance that I showed you, again, was part of this hands-on making component that was in one of our courses. The Facebook group just happened. We didn't ask anyone to do it. We didn't make a group for them. They just did it and found out who we were behind the scenes and invited us to join the group. So, I'm in it, my boss is in it, it's really an interesting place. We get tons of notifications every day about what they're doing, but that was really all on their own. We don't really create Facebook groups like that. We have one page that we don't really actively use, but instead we see each term more and more of these groups starting. So I think there are about 4 or 5 of them now that have popped up. We've had other students compile more images and create other WordPress sites to showcase what they learned in this collage course. And then, with the Second Life, again, she was one of the students from that material and technique course of post-war abstract painting that launched in 2010. And same thing, she was just posting on Facebook, which is actually where we got that image from. We do have our contact information listed in very hidden places in the course, but people still find it, or they'll actually call our customer support team and ask to connect with us, especially when they come on site to the museum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What next?
What next? That's a great question. We are in the process right now of filming, or starting to film a 3rd MOOC for Coursera, and this one is still geared through K-12 teachers, but it's going to be more about what is modern about modern art. And we figured it would be a great way to connect art and inquiry and art and activity, but kind of delve into the artworks that we've already featured in these courses, so that teachers not only know how to teach with them, but also have more contextual information about them. And then at the same time, we decided to start production for a new course on the 1960s that correlates with the reinstallation of the fourth floor gallery at the museum. And the thought there is to try to interview artists that were living during the time, different curators, conservators, but also, anybody that was really active during the 60s, and try to kind of get this full spectrum of all different types of art, but also all different types of people that were involved. So those should hopefully be launching sometime this summer.
Can I ask just one other question?
Yeah, of course.
Just thinking about the kind of difference between, you say you're interviewing like live artists and producing content around that. How do you see that being different to maybe what like an editorial content production team might work on, or people who might produce additional content around an exhibition? Is it just that it's kind of packaged differently, or how would you? Is that something that we experience
that's a great
at our institution, that we end up kind of producing similar content sometimes, but just rebranded for different purposes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, we're very sensitive to the types of content that we're creating and who our intended audience is. When we do an interview, for example, with an instructor, that video only lives in our online course. Or with like a curator, for example, or a conservator, that content only lives in our online course, and it ties into whatever theme or topic is happening that week. That said, yes, there are other types of interviews that happen, but we find that we tell them to go a little bit deeper than what you might see on a resource such as MoMA.org. And again, it's just giving people more information there because you're paying for this course. We also include artist bios, definitions, terminology, links to other resources and artworks that we have. So it's kind of just a place where everything is compiled together, but you're still able to interact with people and post and share what you're learning throughout the course. Yes.
So, Allegra, I just want to understand that the reason that if you record something for the course, if you don't want to release it anywhere else, is because you're trying to preserve the value of the course?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yes, and also because for these premium online courses, if you will, we do charge for them. They range from $99 to $350. So it just seems a little unfair to put that content out for free, but also because some of the stuff doesn't really make sense on its own. It really fits nicely into this course package, and out of context, there's still a lot of rich information, but we think that it just fits better within the context of a full course.
Because the flip side is you could have something that was really good that perhaps was re-edited and replaced in some context and might be useful in some other purpose, but you're explicitly choosing not to do that. And part of the reason is because you're trying to control the value of what you're charging for.
Basically. And yes, this is a conversation we've been having a lot more recently, especially as we've integrated this VDM system into our regular data asset management software. And that's kind of the thought too, is like, okay, well, if we put this content out and have other people across the museum see it, could they use it for something? And if so, what would that purpose be? And yes, we would expect them to re-edit it or shorten it to be smaller clips of that instead of taking like a full 45-minute lecture, for example. But yes, the majority of the reason is to, stick with the integrity of the course content.
All right. Shuffle, shuffle. Switch around. That's it. Need to switch out for see if I can get the preview. Brilliant. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wolff. I'm the Manager of Educational Technology at the American Museum of Natural History. And really today, I wanted to tell you a little bit of where I was coming from as we explore some questions about online teaching and learning a bit later. And so what I'm going to talk about today is really three different ways that we work with online teaching and learning, which will not be a surprise to anyone, is that we're due through synchronous offerings, asynchronous offerings, and blended offerings. And in blended, I mean both a mix of face-to-face as well as asynchronous and synchronous mixed together. So to sort of explore through these couple different lenses, we're going to take a look at some connected classrooms initiatives that we've done with Google. We'll also take a look at Coursera MOOCs and the Seminars on Science courses. Seminars on Science is our online teacher professional development courses that are available for graduate credits. And then for blended, we'll talk a little bit about how we do blends with Seminars on Science content. So what I have up here is sort of this is something I've been exploring with my colleagues, which is this idea of what is the online model, broadly speaking. And we don't mean by a single platform. What we mean is sort of what's the thread that if you look at through all our online offerings and really face-to-face offerings as well. What is the common themes that are going on in there? And what we've been pulling out so far is there's this really big piece of collaboration between both scientists and educators. Scientists are there to make sure that the content is not only accurate and scientifically sound, but it's connected well and supported well by the discipline. And the educators are there to support the pedagogical theory that's going to really help deliver that content and provide understanding. Key part of that as well is igniting passion for science, getting away from this idea of that science is just a collection of facts, but really digging into sort of the interconnected nature of science, as well as the multidisciplinary nature of it. And another important component, which will come up a little bit later when we're talking, is it's been really important for us to have opportunities for rich discussion, and that includes from instructor and scientists to the participants, as well as between the participants themselves, and also provide a method for folks to reflect on the content. So the first thing I wanted to take you into was some of our recent Connected Classrooms initiatives that we've been doing with Google. This is an opportunity where we bring 3 or 4 different classrooms from around the country into a Google Hangout, really for a sort of a behind-the-scenes taste at the museum. Here they're in the Paleontology Prep Lab with Dr. Mark Norell, who's our curator, and also Dr. Jim Short, who is the educator in the video. And we can see sort of this modality that I spoke of before, the model coming through. We find having the educator in there with the scientist really helps act as a cipher for the audience, and can act as a translator and ask the scientist to go a little deeper, where something that the scientist might take as second nature of like, oh, of course everyone knows this because they have a PhD in paleontology, and the educator will know to sort of press them for a little more detail to get in there. And it's been a really big success. We've had people from around the world watching them, both live and while they're recorded, and even classrooms that are not directly in the Hangout can ask questions through the Q&A app and the commenting system that's up there. One of the big initiatives that we've taken on recently, and I'm not sure where we fall on the hype curve of MOOCs currently, is the work that we've done with Coursera. And we've really had the great opportunity to not only develop 3 different MOOCs for Coursera, but we're one of the few partners that has actually offered MOOCs multiple times. We're now up to the 3rd offering, is just finishing up now, of the 3rd course. So that's 9 offerings across the platform. Which is, to our surprise, was a bit rare, in the Coursera MOOC landscape. And we attribute that to a lot of the MOOCs that are put out are typically done by, a single faculty without necessarily a large amount of support, when we really do have sort of both the support of the scientific staff, the educational staff, and a production team to really get in there and support the MOOCs and keep them going. And just because we're talking about MOOCs, it's always fun to sort of throw out those numbers. We're looking at probably about 100,000 learners so far. They come from, I think, almost 150 different countries, tend to be about 60% female. And let's see, what other numbers? The fun thing is that just like most MOOCs across the Coursera platform, and this really gets into one of the questions we'll look at a little bit later, is, what is a learner in your course? Across all of Coursera, about 50% of your students who sign up for your course never even show up. So they never actually log into your course. And when we first started looking at our data analytics coming back from the courses, this was something that was a little shocking to us, and we weren't necessarily prepared for it. And one of the ways that we've altered our perspective to think about that is, 50% of 100,000 is still 50,000 people. But we do want to be careful that we're not making excuses for how we could potentially be engaging an audience more but we also have to be realistic about what people's online behavior is in free choice learning and not beat ourselves up over it. And then Seminars on Science is this online teacher professional development for graduate credit that I've been speaking about before. And these are 6-week-long semester equivalent 3 graduate credit courses that are fully online and asynchronous. And this actually probably informs a lot of the efforts we do in online teaching and learning at the museum the most. Because we've been doing them for over a decade. I think the first one launched perhaps in 2000, and this is, they would be sending videotapes of scientist lectures to people in the mail, really just struggling with the technology at the time. And the courses have really continued to adapt with changing technology over time. These are just 3 of the courses that we offer right now. Currently we offer 13 courses across the life, earth, and space sciences. And the model really shines through here with that expert educator and the scientists in the classroom as well. Each course has a scientist and an educator enrolled in it. And as part of the grade, students in the course are required to participate in forums. And so what we do notice is that because we make it a participation and there's a cost to take these courses, that we do see really rich engagement and reflection on content within the courses. And this is something, again, when we look at free choice learning as opposed to an experience that you're paying a premium from, the big difference that we see and try to explore, how do we want to have engagement in free choice learning. We want to provide opportunities for reflection. But what do you do when not that many people take you up on it? How do you design a system so that one course, when you have 50% of the folks just showing up and watching videos and a smaller percentage engaging meaningfully with one another? Not saying that folks that are only watching the videos are not meaningfully engaging with content, but it is hard for us to sort of look at some analytics of what we consider success in an online course when it is sort of open to the public at large. So I think I covered sort of a bit of this before between the lessons learned and applied. We do try to learn from each of our different offerings and the different modalities and try to take best practices from those and apply them, no matter if it's a MOOC or a face-to-face. Something that we've had successful with is taking an activity for local geology where we ask students to actually go out in their communities and find an interesting outcrop and report on it to the class. We found that to be successful across both face-to-face, the asynchronous online, and in the MOOCs as well. In fact, that assignment drove the most amount of forum activity over anything else that we've done in our courses. And so there are these sort of opportunities for daylight where you can engage folks and ask them to get in, but it's difficult in trying to ascertain which of those are going to be successful and which are asking too much of your learners. Thanks, everybody. Any questions?
We're going to be doing a conversation after our next presenter, but are there any especially technical questions or length of course, or sometimes those questions are... Yes, we have one more presenter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not like an hour to go.
Yeah, stuff.
Resources. Maybe this is more of a question at the end about the amount of resources and staff that are allocated to the production of a single course.
I would say they're significant.
We just lost Rolin.
Oh, we may have just lost Rolin. And I think that's one of the things where museums excel in comparison to maybe that sort of lone professor model that might be happening at some universities, is that you do have a history of, sort of creating exhibits or creating rich online experiences that can be leveraged in teams that already exist that you don't have to create out of thin air to help you with this effort. So we didn't hire anyone. We did hire a TA to help us out with it, but we didn't. All the production already exists sort of internally in the project management and development of resources. There's just redirection of staff time.
Have you done any investigation into why people sign up and then don't show up?
So we've done a little bit of our own in another great advantage of having run sort of 9 of them at this point is our own data analytics and sort of research is starting to bear some fruit. But Coursera has also shared sort of widely why people do that. And it's just because it's what they do. When they sign up for a course, it might have been 3 months ago, like, oh, that sounds great. There's no cost. There's no barrier to entry. The day of the course comes and your life has changed and you don't necessarily have enough time and you may not even pop in. Coursera, I think also to counteract that, is moving towards this sort of rolling enrollment model as well that they're looking to bring out, which is, I guess the theory is that you can start a class anytime because if you have 20 to 100,000 people in your class, you're always going to have a cohort of people that are at a similar place as you, even if you're moving at different paces throughout the course. Sweet. Thanks. He's back.
He's back.
What's up, buddy? All good? Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, how close do I need to be here? Pretty close? Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Emily Lytle-Painter and I'm here from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, where I am the new Senior Digital Content Manager. And slightly differently than our other presenters, I actually haven't managed a course happening directly online. I moved to LACMA from the Getty Museum, where I had recently been exploring sort of over the past year how to add content and start a partnership with the Khan Academy. And we had really been exploring how to add content that could be accessed sort of on a one-off model. And I had done a lot of thinking about that. And actually, I think she's still here. Oh, there she is. There's Lisa. Lisa has been doing some of that work, so if there's any Khan Academy specific questions, I may throw it to you. Basically what I'm going to talk about is free choice learning and some of the things that I have come to, through a year plus of research, think are important about online learning and what I think is valuable. So as you all know, museums are the place where free choice learning is queen. And right now we're at a point where online as well, there's more information available at this exact second. You all are generating this information in your tweets than there's ever been to as many people ever in history. And that's not going to change. So even though museums are the experts and we have the opportunity to be great connectors, people are already doing this. So I read a story in an online learning article, and I have looked for this article since we were talking this summer. I cannot find this article, but this man wrote a story about his daughter. And what he said was that she had expressed an interest, she was 14, and had expressed an interest in learning how to play guitar. And this man studies online learning, right? And he said, oh, great, do you want to go? We can find you an instructor. And she said, Dad, I don't need an instructor, I have YouTube. And this is how people are learning. So not everybody is an autodidact where they're going to go out and seek out information themselves and then start Microsoft and be billionaires, right? People need teachers, but they're finding these teachers in different places than they ever have before. So what are people finding online? They're finding visual information. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with John Green or the Crash Course. These are free videos that are available, and they're teaching history, and his brother, Hank Green, is teaching science in an incredibly engaging way for free. And kids are flocking to it. They are getting millions of views. And not just on their Crash Course videos, also on all their other videos. They're also learning at their own pace. I was talking to Heather Hart yesterday, and she was sitting typing away on her computer. And I looked over and I said, "Are you kidding me?" She had probably, I'm not exaggerating, 100 tabs open, which I can't do. I can't think like that. But she clicks around, she sees something that interests her, and she leaves it open, and she goes back to it when she needs it, and every once in a while gets rid of all of them and starts afresh. So this is a way that people are learning at their own pace and accessing information when they need it, when they have time. There's no barrier to create your own interpretation anymore. Everyone is a multimedia producer. And when you have access to create video for free on the phone that you have in your pocket, all of a sudden you don't really need any sort of worksheet or anything else like that, because you're creating incredibly rich stories with what you have available. And there's also the opportunity to jump in immediately to the discussion, and people are doing this in very rich ways and mashing up information to create their own stories from what they're learning online. I really liked this one. These are like sticks with shark teeth that have been bound to them, and they're tribal objects, but I loved that whoever found this image called them shark weapons. So museums, in theory, are the internet of the physical world. We have endless opportunities for connections within our walls and endless places to tell stories. But how do I access these learners that are now finding everything that they need to find online? Hold on, I have to turn my notes here. Short of conscription, and short of only sharing our courses with classrooms that are forced to watch it, what is the best way to get to some of these people who are looking for information right now? These are the, not rules, but ideas that I've come up with for myself to think about. I think we have to share freely. Sorry, Allegra. When we are putting our information out online for other people to use, new connections can be made by people who have different experiences from us. And so a video that comes from somewhere else, like LACMA, for instance, might be able to be used in, if I had a video on contemporary painting, and somebody from China, let's say, and somebody was doing a course on contemporary Chinese politics, maybe they could use that video. And these connections, by sharing the media that we're producing, are limitless. Look at all those little puppies. We need to be multidisciplinary. This is nothing new to museums, but the interconnectedness of information on the web is how people are accessing and learning now. And integrating arts into STEM learning is absolutely the way of the future. I don't think funding cuts are going to magically disappear, and we have to be vigilant to continue to encourage creativity throughout the classroom, and also creative thinking in adults. We have to allow drop-ins. As we've heard a couple people talk about, there is a huge rate of people who are leaving classes that they've signed up for. But they probably were interested in something that was happening within this course. And maybe they just needed to know one thing. So how can we segment and share our information in a way that allows people to get at what they need? And this is one of the things that really attracted me to the Khan Academy model. Because if you're great on mathematics, but you need to brush up on fractions, you don't have to sign up for a course. You go and watch the video you need, and then you leave. I think it also helps with people who have short attention spans. You can go in and learn something specific and move on. And I don't have an answer to this problem of how we segment this content, but I think it's something that we need to work on. I think we have to encourage dissension. There is I think there are a lot of learners in the world who are worried to sign up for a course because they're doing it wrong, and I think we're very familiar with these people in our physical museums. So figuring out how to make people feel welcome to disagree with us as authority, places of authority, and figures of authority is incredibly important. And then the last one is to make what we're doing mobile. Right now, 90% of the adult population of the United States has mobile phones. And by 2020, 90% worldwide will. And a huge percentage of the world accesses their internet from their mobile phones. So by being able to access our content through the mobile web, we enable a larger swath of people to be able to access it. I said access twice.
Access is important.
Access. And I loved what you said. I don't have it in my slides, but I loved what you said about transcripts, which I think is also really important. Transcripts, when you have all of your information locked in a video file or audio file, you can't unlock that. If you have it transcribed, all of a sudden it's pretty easy to translate it into Spanish and translate it into anything else. So I think thinking about the future of online learning for me is thinking about not how to have the only ice cream scoop, but how to provide our ice cream scoop into a larger batch that's available. So I look forward to the forthcoming discussion. Thank you.
There's a lot of musical chairs and sound that I'm going to try and do. So I'd love to, at this point, bring in Rolin, who is behind me on the iPad, but the benefits of mobile. Just plug this in like this. Can you hear us? How are we sounding?
Hello?
I'm pushing the plug in for
How are you sounding now?
Okay, yeah, how do I sound?
Not very loud. Because Rolin and I actually had some of the earliest conversations about this panel based on a session that he had done. It was at MCN, I think, yes?
Yes. Yeah, last year.
Maybe a year and a half ago? Well, it had to have been 2 years ago. But that I really saw a need for, and I think an intersection of what's happening in that higher ed or MOOC space that's sort of getting, especially in light of like Times Word of the Year or whatever that circle of hype was, and that what museums, I mean, in Dan's case, have already done for 10 years plus. They're on their 9th Coursera course. I mean, most universities can't even claim that. And yet, of course, museums have been completely left out of this conversation. So I am so grateful to you because you were, I think, amongst I remember seeking you out and being like, oh my gosh, somebody else. I mean, I knew that this conversation was happening in my field, but I certainly didn't see it in education. So I've invited Rolin to be the first respondent and sort of hear because he's been also in this field, and like I said, it's the topic of his research as well. So I'd love to take it away and get your name placard so it's official.
Excellent. Sound is good?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm sorry I can't be with you guys today. I've actually been at a conference regarding open education, and it's been very interesting for me because the tweets that I've been seeing out of MCN have had a lot more discussion of open as a value and open as more than just process and agency. But how do we...
Woo! Sorry. Pause. Yeah! Sorry.
Excellent. Yeah, so an 11-year conference dealing with open has not been able to keep up with you guys over there, which I think is wonderful. I do see a disconnect, though, in that conversation and what we're talking about in this room. The question, Rosanna, that you posed in your presentation, which I thought was an excellent summation, not only for the history of distance online education from a museum perspective, but just for the field in general. There's a lot of ahistoricism around technology. And it's very important to bring up those things that have been happening throughout history to remind us to connect to our past so we don't continue to roll the same narratives out just at a more expensive cost. And so you asked what motivates people to get involved in this, and I've heard a number of times, Dan really focused on this in his section, that half the people that sign up for a course with Coursera, for example, don't take any part in it. And that's a very frustrating element for anybody involved, whether it's Coursera, the museum, but it's also frustrating for the learner because there was something that motivated that person to sign up, especially in the case of taking a course from a museum versus taking a course from MIT. So there's an opportunity there that's being missed, and I think it's important to consider that, because I think it was Emily who mentioned not everybody's an autodidact. But if you look at the success rate in MOOCs, you'll notice that it's usually the autodidact percentage. We assume between 1/6 and 1/7 of people would be considered autodidacts, people that can learn regardless of the structure or scaffolding around them. And that's about the same percentage of people that finish MOOCs. And I think that there's definitely a correlation between those two. So we need to get at what the situation is of motivation. And for me, I think part of the issue is this way in which we talk about structuring online education. So I'm going to make a provocative statement. I'm going to say, and I think that the successes that have come out of MoMA and have come out of the American Museum of Natural History, I think those successes are not because of the MOOC. I think they're in spite of it. When I listen to Dan and Allegra talk about the wonderful things that are happening, the examples of transformation that they see in their courses, I hear things like, they just did it. They just put together this community. And we're excited that they did this. We're excited that they're going out and building and constructing knowledge. But that's happening outside of the central structure that we have facilitated this course in. Dan says that the activities for engagement, trying to balance and weigh what's happening there, that's the ideal. That's the sweet spot that they are looking for. And that's the sweet spot that all of us are looking for. I will have a full response, a proper essay, and I have some slides to go with it, and I'll have that on my website. I'm the only Rolin Mo in existence, so you can just search my name if you want to find that. But in talking about that, I do have a slide in regards to what constitutes learning in this day and age. Because Rosanna shows the great evolution of distance education, from the correspondence courses of the Penny Post to radio, to television, and now to telecommunications, which has given me the opportunity to talk to you guys. Learning has also gone through a change, and it's not just piggybacking on the changes in technology. The way that we think about how people learn has expanded widely, and we know that people learn best when they're active in their learning, when they're constructing their knowledge, when they have an opportunity to communicate, collaborate, and create with one another, with a group of experts, and with varied content. And notice content was the last thing that came up in my notice there. And that's what I've seen a lot coming out of MCN, is content as secondary rather than content as thrust. And my worry about the future of education is that these structures such as Coursera and Khan Academy, which provide an ease, an economy, and an authority with them. These are spaces that have had success in technology. We're going to center on those because of those three reasons. Learning was not one that was involved in that, rather than seeking out new ideas and new ways to do things. I was looking over the Horizon report for museums, and I thought it was very interesting to see, outside companies stepping in to educate. And in that section, they talk about Museum Hack, which has this idea of a grassroots organization, kind of like the Indie Web. But at the same time, then you have these multinational corporations like Udacity, Khan Academy, Coursera that are coming in and working with the same things. And what I ask is why? Why does a space that already has the authority need to partner up with these kind of archaic structures? Sal Khan will say that education hasn't changed in 200 years. And Michael Anderson, the venture capitalist who has funded Udacity, says it hasn't changed in 1,000. And I'll go ahead and I'll say education from that perspective hasn't changed in 2,500 years since the Greeks. But the problem is, when they're saying these things haven't changed, they're making an argument that their technology changes it. and their technology is window dressing. The manner of education, this didactic mode of instruction, that's still not changing. And we have this technology that exists now that we're talking about in all sorts of other spaces, that gives us that opportunity to create knowledge, to collaborate, to communicate, the Google Docs, the WordPress, the Second Life thing, which is incredible. What an amazing thing. And especially the fact that that's somebody who is unable, because of issue, to be able to greatly engage in the museum in a traditional manner. So there are options in doing this. There was something that I saw from MCN talking about the future of digital publishing is GitHub. And I think that's a great model to look at. If you want to think about a future, you can think about federation as a means for people to build on this. So I do want to ask a couple of questions. The first one that I have is specifically for Allegra and Daniel. What do you guys see is the benefit of partnering with Coursera versus the courses that you guys have done just in-house?
I can repeat the question. Do you want me to repeat it?
I could hear it fine, but I don't know if I heard.
Did everyone hear the question? Great. Okay, good.
Yeah, so I think, when we first started doing online courses, it was 4 years ago and Coursera did not exist. So that's why we did them, again, was to give access to people. We do these fantastic on-site programs, but those are really limited to people in the tri-state area, but specifically New York City. They're once a week, they're on-site, you really have to make a commitment to do that. But when you shift to online learning, it becomes kind of more of this on-demand process where you can go at your own pace. As Emily was saying, it's free choice learning. You select what you want and when you want to do it. We moved to Coursera because we thought it was a new opportunity for us to try a different platform. Another great benefit for this was that our partnership with them is solely to create teacher professional development courses. And this is something we were not doing before, and this is something that as a museum partnership, they really are only interested in doing, at least for now. So I think it was just a way for us to reach a different demographic and also to partner up with a company that already had such a strong following and already had hundreds of thousands and millions of people enrolling in their courses. We do have traffic from Coursera back to MoMA.org for people interested in learning about some of the other courses we offer. But again, the content is very different. I think Coursera is doing a great thing of free education. And, I think it's been really beneficial for us to reach that demographic of a younger age group, but also to give people more information about how we teach on-site and hopefully inspire them to teach that way as well. And we see that. We see how they're planning their lessons. We're seeing images of them, of not just teachers, but stay-at-home moms doing these activities with their kids too. So for us, it's been really great. And I know we're really excited about making our third MOOC. And who knows? Technology evolves so quickly. Learning is evolving rapidly as well. Maybe Coursera won't be the next best thing in a couple of years, but for now, we're really happy with our partnership with them.
Okay. Yeah, I can hop in and to echo some of what you just said. But exposure, I think, is a big portion of it as well. I would say probably about 5 or 10 years ago, one mode of thought was, how can we bring people to our site? How can we bring people to our site to see our content on our site? Was sort of the mantra. And recently, the shift has been more, how can we bring our content to where people are? Why they're engaged in this ecosystem. Giving them things to feed on in their ecosystem is a lot easier than trying to transpose them over to somewhere new. And that's really something that we've noticed from our learner analytics from Coursera. About 80% of the folks in our Coursera courses have never been to the museum before. And that speaks to sort of the breadth and access that Coursera has. Courserians, as they're called, find out about courses on Coursera, just like con goers. I don't know if they're Conians or what they might be. People find comfort in the learning environment that they feel best matches them, and you're not going to convince them to come somewhere else. And so really providing avenues for them to reach your content where they are, I think has been sort of a strategic shift, not only for us, but for other institutions as well.
Rolin, what I heard in your question too is like, in what ways are we being suspect of existing corporate platforms? And I think this is a legitimate question for the field of like, what ways are we looking at platforms like Coursera and questioning desires that could be much more around numbers, monetization, and learning analytics, and less about tapping into or asking these wider questions of like true motivation. What is getting someone excited to take an online course that's created by a museum, whether or not they stay, besides the point, what even gets them excited to put their email address and start looking at that first week of content. But versus like thinking through what the tensions are of things that just cannot happen in a museum, that the people who know us love us. I think that's been sort of a sort of one of the positives and the negatives is like who knows us loves us, but there are so many people who've never thought to look at a museum in terms of content and online learning. The fact that one of the earliest courses that were offered by MoMA was a painting course on abstraction, and that someone would say, I love painting, I want to learn how to paint, and MoMA has paintings. I want to learn from MoMA about how to paint. I mean, that leap, I think, is one that I do think that museums need to seize and kind of hold much more firmly, because I think that will be stolen from us, I think, by platforms that in putting all my cards down, I don't trust the altruistic sensibilities of these larger MOOC platforms. I think that we should all be suspect and kind of question what they are, but they offer a much far greater reach, and then the support that frankly I think is very hard to get from your own organization until you've had a little bit more proven success.
Really excellent discussion, you guys. And for me, Rosanna, you and I have talked about this before, but what is, these organizations that are setting up these MOOCs, there is a reason for them believing in this, and I don't believe that there's some nefarious means of gathering learner data. I believe that it's truly a way that they believe that learning happens best. But if we look outside of the model and think about the MOOC movement as a sociocultural phenomenon, it is shaping how we think about learning. And if we're consolidating learning into these spaces and saying, well, look at this wonderful stuff happening outside of the space, I worry that we're going to lose track of that. I got a couple more questions.
And then we need to, from the audience, I think.
Well, so yeah, okay, so I will ask, I'll ask one more question and then I want to leave it for the audience. And this is for everybody. One of the great things about Coursera Khan Academy is the analytic back end. It's a centralized system, and it can aggregate all sorts of learning analytics. So how are these analytics changing the way that you and your institutions are designing learning? Because all of you have done further iterations and further courses.
So it's definitely been useful for us as well. We do use analytics in our traditional smaller course sizes as well. But just the sheer number of people that are pounding on your quizzes or whatever it might be really can tell you quickly right away, there's obviously something strange about this question. It's not that it's necessarily difficult, it's that the wording is confusing for learners. And just getting that sort of instant feedback on that level of scale is very useful for helping us to refine questions. And each of the offerings of the MOOCs that we've done, rewriting the self-quiz assessments has been probably the biggest chore when we re-offer the course, of looking at where the misunderstandings were, how they were connected to content, and the data analytics really help with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I really have mixed feelings about the analytics dashboard. For me, it's interesting to log in and see where people are from and how many people have enrolled and how many people are watching videos, but I really don't think it's that useful compared to some of the other more in-depth research we do. We have a whole interpretation and research department in education where we have someone whose full-time job is making these surveys, compiling data, and asking more in-depth questions from our users. And I think for us, that's a way to really kind of not just scratch the surface and see like demographics, but rather to get more in depth, as Dan was saying, and find out what some of the successes of the course were, but also what didn't you like? What were some of the challenges that you had when facing this course, either with the content or with the platform and the layout. So I think, yes, that analytics dashboard feature that they just added to Coursera has been interesting, but I don't know really how much we've used it besides to throw stats around.
Yeah, and I'll add in the urban ed space, of which I claim my other roost, is that there's so much suspicion around this flattening into analytics that I think can be used for good and for evil.
Yeah. And again, it's great to see 33% of our enrollments are from emerging economies. That's fascinating and good to know. But does that really affect the content we're producing? Not really. It's makes us aware that, yes, again, we need to be accessible. We have to have transcripts. We have to have captions. But aside from that, I really don't think the dashboard's the most exciting thing about Coursera.
So we have a few hands up. We'll do Liz and then I think to stop.
My question is kind of zooming back a little bit as far as thinking about that we are in museums, and so I wondered if from you or from pressure from other parts of the museum, pressure good or bad, about connecting these people. So there's a question about follow-up, and then there's also a question about follow-up from what the institution wants, which maybe you may or may not agree with it sometimes, as far as trying to get people in some kind of membership or other contact roles or things like that. So is there, for better or for worse, talk about then integrating these people into a larger, or course takers into a larger kind of connection with the museum?
Yeah.
And is it for better or for worse if it is happening?
I would say yes, absolutely. We're very aware of who our audience is. We're looking mostly at our for-profit courses, the ones we've been offering for 4 years now. We do offer a discount for our members. It's 20% off. When people see the cost of the course, depending, our instructor-led 10 weeks long, that's $350. A membership is cheaper than that, and they can also get a discount by becoming a member. So we do have a really high conversion rate.
Do you hand over that contact information to your membership department so that they turn into prospects or things like that? Does it go into that?
Yes, we do use that information for marketing and for membership, but we don't do it the other way around. We're not, it's interesting how we target people. Members are definitely a great resource for us. We will use them for email blasts. There's a way to track which member has taken how many of our courses and whether or not it makes sense to target them again when we're creating new content. But on the flip side, the museum is also very sensitive to who's signing up for what. So although we might have a huge listserv of people that are coming to our on-site events or your exhibition openings, we would never be able to use that list to target them and try to get them to enroll in our courses.
But do you give your information to marketing so they can market?
Yeah, we do, because we also have a really high return rate for our courses. Our alumni following, as we saw with some of the sites they're doing, is really strong. I would say about 35 to 45% of the people that have taken a course have taken more than one of our courses from us. We also have some people that retake the same course over and over because they want to see what it's like to have more discussions with different people on the same content. So we have a really high repeat rate.
Yeah, I would say as far as marketing and informing folks about upcoming course offerings, it's primarily a segmented operation. So everyone, the museum, gets to know of all the sort of points of contacts that are going on. But unless you specifically say, I want to be told about everything, then you'll get just things that are relevant to what your interests were, at least as I understand it. People are very protective of, the communities they've nurtured over the years. So they do sort of all go into the pot to get counted, but they don't, get, I guess, the typical joke is, from the bookstore, do your Christmas shopping here type emails.
Yeah. And actually, something I just thought of too. So we also just integrated our courses into our MoMA store, which is a huge area of people that just are interested in the products that we sell there. And it's been really successful for us. We are only selling the self-guided versions, which are the cheaper ones, but it's been great for us to hit a larger community there marketing and promotional emails to the store. So we'll run discounts and sales and things like that and just generate it through the store. But we're working very closely with their graphics and their team as well as the other marketing teams in the museum.
I was just going to add something to the earlier discussion about data and the use of data.
Thank you.
Sarah. I was just going to add that, in addition to what Allegra and Dan had said, that the data is triangulated, or I would say what is actually probably more useful than the built-in data dashboard in Coursera has been the discussion forums and using that as a qualitative source of information. And knowing that there's a lot of kind of self-regulation and feedback embedded within those discussions on voices, on the content, points of confusion, and also the liveliness of that and the other affinity groups that have kind of grown up, sprouted up on Facebook and social media, has shown us that, or MoMA, doing things, kind of blended modes. So not just, having the move be completely asynchronous, but adding elements like synchronous elements, like doing Google Hangouts, to kind of build off of that desire, that clear desire to have some sort of face-to-face or a way to have a real-time engagement with the course instructors and the other participants in the courses.
Yeah, and as Dan was saying, Coursera is shifting their whole platform right now to this on-demand, what am I saying, interface? Course format. And they've kind of gotten rid of all the discussion forums. We were doing some testing with them the other day, but it's going to be really interesting because I think as rich as the discussion forums are, their biggest flaw was how you could navigate through them. So someone might start one thread, and before you know it, they have 500 emails in their inbox because they forgot to unclick the notification. And furthermore, it's really hard to find all the discussion. Fortunately, they allow you to do a keyword search. Although, as Stephanie was saying, there's so much rich information in there, and people are sharing images, they're sharing so much about them. But now that Coursera is shifting away from this module, it's going to be really interesting to see how the content absorption switches. They're adding some. Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, so we've seen the preview. It's interesting. I mean, they're still sort of rolling it out right now. I guess sort of a deeper question maybe for the group to think about as well is, what makes an online course and not a digital textbook? Right. Is sort of something that we bat around inside our heads a lot of times is a really rich digital textbook with a nice instructional cycle built into it that's been curated. Is that an online course, or does an online course necessarily have some form of person-to-person interaction? And it's interesting to me that a lot of the modes in the MOOC are sort of going away from sort of the interaction and being more, and not just MOOCs, but Khan and everything else, where your discussion and the community that you have around the content is more, seems sort of dismissive in what you might do, that you might give it a +1 or a thumbs up or a Facebook like. And there's an earlier talk where they talked about, I forget what it was, community consumption or something like that. And I don't know if that's real community consumption, if everyone is sort of just doing one throwaway lines or, hey, check out this link that you might tweet out to someone on Twitter. Those platforms have been shown to support much deeper and richer discussion, but you need to find a way to encourage people to actually do that, or it will just be +1 like.
Good way to put it.
I have a question. I don't know if it's for maybe with you. How definitely on Coursera, but on other platforms where you're maybe seeding your content, how much are you trying to encourage consumers to come back to the website? And do you think that's important that the museum's website remains the hub for knowledge and activity, or do you Dan, you mentioned it's where the consumers are and where the audience is. So that's, but then Allegra, you were kind of saying that it's about going to YouTube or places like that. But is it ultimately you're still trying to signpost them back to the museum so that the awareness always remains with the museum?
I think that I would be fooling myself if I didn't say that brand awareness was important. Whether or not that directly brings them back to the website, I think in an ideal world that would be a nice benefit that everyone would be thumbs up about. But that there is an association between this rich content that you're getting is associated with our brand, come back for more, whoever it might be, is.
Do you think that's clear though? Because that's one of the things I wonder that as we see stuff further and further away, that actually people just take it and don't necessarily know where it's come from. Maybe that's okay because they're still learning and they're still digesting it.
Yeah, I think, I think for us, all our videos are branded, the courses are branded, where they say whether or not, say, an American Museum of Natural History actually means something to someone. Hopefully, at the worst, it will mean, that was a really great course. Next time I see those 4 words together, I'm going to take that course again because I have experiences with them.
I don't know. I think we definitely take advantage of resources such as MoMA Learning or such as MoMA.org because we have so many definitions on there as is. But it's really interesting because we kind of copy that off of those sites to put into the course. And then we add a link like, if you want to learn more, click here. And I think, we're trying to harbor all of this in one environment, but we're still giving people that option. If they want to explore more on their own, that they can, and they're learning the source. Now, that said, driving traffic to our site is always good, but that's not really our main goal by linking back to it. It's just trying to give more information.
In my opinion, I think that prefaces or preferences an in-person visitor as better than a digital visitor, and I would challenge that assumption. I think that
entire MCN closing plenary debates have looked at that question. I mean, it's a really important one, or to say like as important as one another.
Of course, I say something that smart after Liz leaves.
Come on.
I think for us, from my point of view, reaching somebody who doesn't know that it comes from my institution is still reaching somebody. Right. And so this is another old idea, but that museums are not in the business of competing with one another. And so if we're building each other up and I'm getting people to understand how to look at objects in Germany and they're going to their museum down the street, then that's still a win for me. And so I think from my point of view, spread it far and wide and that it's not a different type of learning that I'm asking them to engage in.
Do you think that's agreed on the director level?
You could flip that. I mean, you could flip that in so many ways, right? It's like, is it important? Well,
so
yes.
I think in the Kumbaya world, we would all agree very much with
Here
that
we
statement.
go.
Flip the table. Kumbaya what?
That that reaching a learner is much more important than saying that we reached that learner. I think we would all agree to that.
Totally.
But that sort of being the the ground rules that we've all agreed on. That's where I would say that people that are above me would be interested in maintaining that brand awareness. And I would say even for myself to maintain that, I do think that there is value in that, but not necessarily at the expense of educative goals.
And I would just add that I think where all of us we're so hungry for the larger trajectory. When someone signs up for one of these courses, that's content that our museum is putting in, and just thinking through like, okay, they did that. Now what's next, right? It's the longer story that I think. And I will confess why the Sunrise semester stuff has just gotten me so passionate, because it's not part of the part that I presented, but there are these people commenting on the YouTube comment section, and to Steph's point about the soft data, the qual that you can kind of get out of that, remembering from age 5 and 6 of watching that television show 30, 40 years ago, are we creating those types of experiences where people are going to think about this 30 or 40 years from now? Is that the litmus test? I mean, I know, to Emily's point, like, what are we in the business? I mean, we're like places of excellence. That's what we do. And if it's not being held to that really high bar, I think I would question why we do it. Rolin, I want to toss it to you, see if you've got any question in the wings that close us out.
Excellent. And thank you guys for, this has been an excellent conversation. Glad to be a part of it. I know we only have 1 minute, so I'll make it quick. Thinking about futures and hopes and fears of online learning and things going forward, what's one thing that you want to see in online learning that either isn't happening now or is happening and could be better? What's something that the next models need to take into account?
So this any vendors out there in the world listening up? This is my true desire right now in online learning. There is a long history in face-to-face learning of having people do activities like think, pair, share. Go off in your own group, do some work, report back to the group as a whole. Can we please get some tools that do that well? That isn't a whiteboard with just 5 different shapes that people can stamp around. But we need an activity for groups of learners to be able to go off without being techno wizards, create something, and then meaningfully share that back with the group. That seems like the simplest ask in any sort of face-to-face classroom. You just give someone a big piece of paper and some markers. And I've yet to see any sort of platform deliver meaningfully on that.
I was going to say applications for social learning.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Huge
I
gap.
think that's our biggest frustration with all the LMS platforms we're using, both for all of our courses. And it's something that it just doesn't exist right now. And it's like ways to harbor discussion and social interaction. It's just text right now. People can upload images or videos sometimes, but things just get lost. And so I think, if we could figure out another way to really make these discussions meaningful and not just pages and pages and pages of text that it's a little overwhelming sometimes. But that would be my one wish too.
Look at that agreement.
Oh,
Agreements!
We bring the panel together.